Good evening. And on this, our final evening of this class, I would like to start, of course, with my thank yous. Not that thank yous are a matter of course, but that thank yous must be in their proper order. First of all, my very, very deep thanks for your generosity, because what you have financially contributed is a very substantial sum, and from any standpoint is generous. And while on this subject of gratitude, of money, may I say this from the standpoint of the infinite way: let nobody ever feel bashful or backward in talking about money. Sometimes in the metaphysical world, money is a taboo subject. Sometimes the impression is that money and spiritual things don't go together. And that's nonsense, utter nonsense. As long as we are engaged in a human activity under our present system of finances, money is an important factor. Someone said recently, truth ought to be free. That's more nonsense, too. As a matter of fact, the most expensive pursuit in the world is the pursuit of truth. The Master recognized that when he said, "Sell all that thou hast, if you find the pearl. Leave mother, brother, sister, father for my sake. Give up all for my sake." There's nothing cheap about truth. There's nothing inexpensive about truth. The price of it is so high that there are very few people in all the world that can pay the price. And the price isn't only in money, it's in many other ways, but believe me, money is one of them. Now, it must be evident to everybody that regardless of how spiritual a teaching is, that it must be conducted on a human level in order to benefit you or me. In other words, you either have to come to Hawaii if you want personal instruction in the infinite way, or you have to bring Hawaii to South Africa. One or the other. And that involves money. You have to have a lecture room, and that involves money. And the lecturer has to eat, which some people sometimes deny. They don't see a good reason for it, and maybe they know more about it too. Probably metaphysical teachers should learn not to eat. Now, everything connected with the metaphysical work, and it makes no difference now whether it's infinite way, unity, Christian Science, New Thought, mind science, everything connected with that activity, except the impartation of truth itself, is a human activity requiring rents, books, papers, printing, labor, transportation. And so in the last analysis, somebody has to pay money for truth. Even in such a spiritual undertaking as spiritual healing, the spiritual healer has not only to live, but should be maintained in quite a degree of comfort, so that the lacks and limitations of the world do not become a burden to them, and their mind can be free for their spiritual ministry. So you will find that no matter how spiritual your teacher or practitioner is, unless they've risen above eating and sleeping, money is involved in the activity. And the question then arises as to who is to pay it. Now, in some of the metaphysical activities, where a great deal of the work is supposedly free, I say supposedly free because none of it is free. Somebody's paying for all of it. But where it is supposedly free, there are some who do not pay, and some who do not pay adequately. But that doesn't mean that it's free. It just means that somebody else is carrying that share of the expense. Now, from the standpoint of the infinite way, I would like to explain to you that this is an injustice. Those who provide truth, supposedly free, are doing an injustice to their very followers. And the reason is this: there is no such thing as free truth. And if you think you're getting truth free, you may not be paying anything, but you're not getting anything, because you're not getting anything that you're not paying for. There is a law of compensation which says that nobody on the face of the globe can get anything they don't pay for in one way or another. And so it is that, and I ask you to watch this now, because I'm going to give you one of the deep principles of the infinite way, more especially one of the deep principles of supply. If I say to you, you're a beggar, and so I don't expect you to pay for anything, I am, so far as my mind is concerned, making you a beggar. And if you accept my evaluation of you and say, oh yes, I'm a poor thing and I have too much expense in other ways I can't pay, you are perpetuating yourself as a beggar. Because here is the spiritual principle of supply. Now mark this well, because if you remember this, your demonstration of supply will be quick and abundant. To him that hath shall be given, and from him that hath not shall be taken away even the little that he hath. Sounds cold and cruel, doesn't it? To him that hath shall be given. From him that hath not shall be taken away even the little that he hath. Now here is a spiritual principle. The moment you say, I have not, you've said it, and you've got it, and you're stuck with it. The very moment you acknowledge your lack, you have acknowledged the only lack you can ever be made to suffer, that which you acknowledge. Now, on the basis of this principle, if I say to you, as a spiritual teacher, please accept this. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Now, if you will accept that as a principle, then we will take the next step. We will close our eyes for a moment, and we will say, I. All the integrity of the Father is my personal integrity. All of God's grace is mine. All of God's love for his children is mine. All of God's care for his own is mine. The life of God is mine. The soul of God is mine. The Spirit of God is mine. The infinite storehouse of supply of God's is mine. All that the Father hath is mine. Now dare you in the next breath say, I'm a poor beggar, send me a magazine for nothing, or send me a treatment for nothing, or send me a class for nothing? No, you daren't. What you must say is, I recognize that God's gifts are mine, God's grace is mine, that God has blessed me with himself. And so I begin with what I have. If I am the widow in the Old Testament, and I have only a cruse of oil with a few drops in it, then I begin to pour those few drops. If I am the master sitting up on the mountain with a multitude to be fed, and I have only a few loaves and fishes, then I break those few loaves and fishes, and I begin to share what I have, and the principle multiplies them, just as the principle keeps the cruse of oil from ever running dry. From the moment that you acknowledge that all the Father hath is yours, and begin to live as if it were so. I don't mean going into debt. I don't mean being foolish and spending what you haven't got and then depending on God to demonstrate it for you next month. I don't mean anything stupid like that. I mean that if you have but 1 shilling, then take 1 pence and begin to dispense it for benevolence or spiritual purposes or some other thing not connected with your own personal good or your family's. And do it secretly, as the Master taught. Don't do your alms before men where you can get men's praises. Do it secretly where nobody knows it but God. In your relationships with your spiritual teaching, whether it is the infinite way, whether you are following the path of truth, science of mind, institute of religious science, it makes no difference which. Remember this, you can get from it nothing more than you put in. If you won't put in study, I don't care which of the principles you're following, you won't get much out. If you do not recognize your obligation to it, the same thing follows. Supposing, just for a moment, that you have gathered the impression during this study and classwork that the infinite way is really something good in the world, something good for you. Do you not have to agree then that it must be very good for the rest of the world? Then you not only are under obligation to pay for what you get, but to help support it for the rest of the world that doesn't yet know its value. And the same is true with any of these other teachings. If you think enough of them to follow them, then think enough of them not only to adequately support your local institution, but also to promote its spread if you think it's that good that it's worthy of being spread. Then you will be a disciple. Then you will have left the world for the Christ. Then you will be spending your good not only for food and clothing, but for spiritual things, and spiritual things is where you gain your enrichment. Now you see, nobody should be permitted ever to convey to you the impression that there's anything on this earth that you can't afford and that you can't have if so be you fulfill the way of getting them, that is, your conscious union with God. I say to you that there is nothing in all this world that you can't afford, nothing that's right for you to have if you make your union with God and maintain it. But don't think that you're going to make it and maintain it from a standpoint of lack or limitation. You're going to make it only from a standpoint of your conscious oneness in God. I don't say that you're rich. I don't even say that you have a pound. I merely say you are the heir of God, joint heir to all the heavenly riches, and that you have the possibility and potentiality of demonstrating that in terms of dollars and pounds. I don't care what your immediate financial status may be. Heaven knows I've been broke enough in my days. You may be too. There's no disgrace about it. Those are just transitional experiences that we go through for some good purpose. Don't be ashamed of it if at the moment you're broke. That isn't the point. The thing to be ashamed of is if you stay that way long, because it's indicating you're not making a spiritual effort to get out. Now, a spiritual effort doesn't merely consist in going to a practitioner and saying, give me a treatment for supply, or even giving me 10 treatments for supply. Heavens no, they can do it, and they can bring you a temporary supply too. Any practitioner can who's had any degree of experience. But what good is it to you after you've got it, unless you also develop the state of consciousness that goes with it to produce it for the future? We use this illustration in our Kailua series because sitting in my chair in my living room, I look out on about 50 coconut trees. And every once in a while, the boys come around and strip those trees of coconuts. It keeps the trees clean, and it paves the way for them to grow still more coconuts, and it pays them a penny apiece profit besides. So it blesses everybody all around. And so I was looking at a few of those trees that particular day were bare, and at some others that had as many as 50 coconuts on them. And in speaking of supply, I said to the students, supposing one of these barren trees should look around and see the neighbor tree with 50 coconuts and say, oh, lend me some of your coconuts. And so we go and pick them off one tree and hang them on another. Now, you wouldn't say that that coconut tree had demonstrated supply, would you? No, and if you can go out and borrow some money or get something for nothing, you haven't demonstrated supply. The only supply that you ever demonstrate is that which unfolds from within your own consciousness. That's yours. The only coconut supply that a coconut tree ever can demonstrate are the coconuts that grow up from within itself and get poured out onto the branches, or with these flowers. You can't hang roses on a rose bush and demonstrate supply that way. A rose bush has to demonstrate roses from within its own self. Now, this is a secret of supply. Supply can't be added to you from anybody. Money can be, yes, you can inherit it, borrow it, steal it, earn it. But supply cannot be demonstrated that way. Supply has to be demonstrated from within your own consciousness. And in order to do it, you have to follow a principle just as if you wanted coconuts or roses. You can't grow coconuts unless you follow the principle of planting coconuts in the right soil, under the right conditions. You can't grow roses unless you plant them in the right soil and keep them adequately under the right conditions. And you can't demonstrate supply unless you follow a spiritual principle. And you have to keep fertilizing, and you have to keep watering, and you have to keep nurturing until your demonstration of supply comes out into the open. Now, the seed you plant is truth. Not just any truth. Oh, no, specific truth. I and the Father are one, and all that the Father hath is mine. Son, thou art ever with me. All that I have is thine. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. I am the bread of life, and the wine and the water. I have meat the world knows not of. All of these specific truths that show the infinite nature of your own being, those are the truths that you have to plant in your consciousness, and you have to let those truths follow through. You remember I said last night that you don't have to be afraid of wrong thoughts. And if you know enough, you can even nullify the effects of universal wrong thought. But remember, I said that you must nullify it, you, consciously. You can't sit back and be a mental vacuum and say, oh, let God do it. You can't sit back and be a mental vacuum and have good come to you. Let me illustrate what I mean. Perhaps you feel that at this moment there is a sense of peace in this room. Well, you're all wrong. There is no peace in this room, and there is no war in this room. The sense of peace is within you. And if you didn't have a sense of peace within you, you wouldn't be feeling it in this room, because this room has nothing of itself. Now, there's no prosperity in this room, and there's no morality in this room, and there's no immorality in this room, no poverty and no wealth. But whatever there is in your consciousness. Now, you determine what's in your consciousness either by neglect or by conscious spiritual activity. You can either walk around like a vacuum, letting anything happen to you that wants, and some days good will happen and some days bad, or you can take hold of yourself and consciously identify yourself with God. Consciously identify yourself with good. Consciously declare your spiritual sonship. Consciously declare that all that the Father hath is yours. And then count up the spiritual things that are God's: integrity, loyalty, fidelity, benevolence, joy, peace, dominion, graciousness, grace, gratitude, love. Those are qualities of God, but they are qualities of yours, because I and the Father are one. But you can't demonstrate them by sitting around being a vacuum. You can only demonstrate them by declaring them, affirming them, repeating them. Now, perhaps you read in my writings sometimes that you mustn't use affirmations. Please don't misunderstand me. I only mean you mustn't make affirmations to make it happen. In other words, don't think walking around saying I'm honest is going to make you so. It isn't. Don't think walking around saying I'm rich is going to make you so. Don't think walking around saying I'm healthy is going to make me so. No, I don't mean that. Declare the qualities of God in your own spontaneous language, not in formulas, not in made-up affirmations or statements, but turn to God and declare what you know to be the truth about God, and then declare that the truth about God is the truth about me, for I and the Father are one. Do you see that? You can be a good thinker in this work, but it isn't going to do you any good to be a poll parrot, because you'll never demonstrate beyond the poll parrot stage. But if you will always start your day's work with the Word God and begin to know all the truth you can know about God, everything you've ever read in Scripture or metaphysics, give God the treatment. Don't give man the treatment. Give God the treatment. In other words, know the truth about God. And then when you're through, realize why everything I've said about God is the truth about me, because I and the Father are one. And all that the Father hath is mine. Do you see that? That's how you hook up the spiritual good of God with individual being. Never declare that you have anything of yourself. Never declare that you're rich. Never declare that you're spiritual. Never declare that you are wealthy or have infinite abundance. Declare that about God, and then realize that whatever is true about God is true about you, for I and the Father are one. And you will be following Jesus Christ's teaching of, I am my own self, am nothing. If I declare anything about myself, I bear witness to a lie. But everything I declare about God is the truth about me. Therefore, I have everything in God. Having God, I have everything. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. Do you see that? I am rich in Christ, in Christhood, in spiritual sonship. And so it is. You must remember this. The world has become lazy. It has become so lazy it won't even read. And so it's got to get magazines full of pictures to look at. It won't read the news. It's got to look at a photograph of the news. It won't read books. It's got to look at photographs of books. We can't do that in our work. We have got to be doers of the Word and not hearers only. We have got to be consciously aware of the truth that we know, not just lackadaisical and let it simmer in and out of our thought, or sit and listen to a teacher half asleep or dreaming about what's coming for lunch or dinner. We have got to be almost sitting on the edge of our seat, listening to every word, imbibing it, and then going out and repeating it. I used to know a Christian Science practitioner who after every lecturer, who after every lecture had a sick stomach. And he'd say, you know what gives it to me? The hundreds of people who come up after a lecture and tell me how they enjoyed it and how they loved it. And then I say, what point did you get particularly? Oh, well, you know, in general, it was beautiful. They didn't hear a word the lecturer was saying. They were daydreaming. It's beautiful. No lecturer wants to hear that his lecture's beautiful. No teacher wants to hear that his lesson is beautiful. What they'd like to hear is, if you heard one sentence, if you heard one idea and said, say, wasn't that a powerful idea you put across with me? I'll be living on that for the next week. That truth will be my bread and my wine and my water. It will form a new body for me. Now you thrill the teacher. But don't tell them that 60 minutes of talk was wonderful. Chances are they know it anyhow, but the point is that they know that you don't know it unless you've caught a point or two or three. Now, health is not going to be difficult to demonstrate, and supply is not going to be difficult to demonstrate if you will acknowledge that the only health you can have is God. And if you will acknowledge the only supply you can have is God, then you can have an infinity of both. But ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. It's ye that must know the truth. Ye who've got to be reading these truths and practicing them. There's no virtue in reading a whole book, and I don't care who the author is. The virtue is in reading enough to catch one idea and smacking the book closed and saying, aha, that's going to be my bread, wine, and water for today. Nobody has to read all of these hundreds of books that are written, not even mine. They don't have to read them. Catch some point, catch some principle, and live with it. Eat it up. Drink it up. Imbibe it in your consciousness until this truth is a blood of your blood, bone of your bone, flesh of your flesh. And then you'll find that a half a dozen truths out of a teaching will really remake your life. Now, I have a question here that's in line with our work tonight. What attitude should the Infinite Way students take towards other metaphysical systems and books? Well, now, let me tell you the attitude. First place, in order to find which teaching that you should follow, you should pray to God, not ask your neighbor, nor follow the most popular one of the moment. But you have a teaching which best suits you at this minute. And there's only one person can tell you which teaching that is, and that's God. And you've got to go within yourself and say, God, show me the path to follow. It may not be my ultimate path, but show me the path I'm to take today. I've got to start somewhere. So show me the path that I'll take today. Now, in some way, God will lead you to the particular path that best suits your present mental and spiritual development. We won't all take the same path. We won't all start with the same path. We won't all end with the same path. But we will, if we trust God, be led to the one that's nearest to us. And if we turn to God, it will be one of the legitimate ones. Now, I'll tell you my attitude about other metaphysical systems and books. There are some of them that are legitimate, that have been founded by men and women of the highest integrity. Men and women who have dedicated their lives to metaphysical truth, to the teaching of it, to the living of it, to the promotion of it. And there are other teachings that are 100% phony. Books that have been written by men who've never healed a case in all their lives. Men who came into metaphysics on Saturday and set up as teachers on Monday. The bookshelves are filled with books by those people. There isn't enough good in any one of them even to pay for the paper they're written on. But if you turn to God, you won't be led to those. They are the products of our American democracy. The Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that if you take out a license as a religious institute or religious organization, that no matter how dishonest it is, you can't be illegal, because no religion has proved its truth. Therefore, nobody can prove that the other fellow's is untrue. So if you decide to go to the States and go to an attorney and pay $200 for a corporation as a religious organization, you can immediately write a book, and you can immediately tell how to heal and how to live spiritually and how to demonstrate supply. The fact that you never knew anything about it until yesterday won't change it. Under the law, you're legitimate. Now, if you pray, you will never be led to people like that. You'll be led to people, and I tell you frankly that we have some very fine men and women in the States who are consecrated and devoted to spiritual and metaphysical truth, some on the spiritual level, some on the mental. But the integrity is equally high, whether it's mental or whether it's spiritual, among those. And heaven help you if you get in the hands of the others. Not that ultimately it'll harm you, because there is a divine grace that sooner or later will wake you up and make you throw it out. But I say to you that you don't have to go through that period of torture. Pray. Pray to God to reveal your teaching. And pretty soon a book will come into your hand, or a teacher will be recommended, or one of the local movements will be recommended, and you will find your starting place. Now, your starting place may also be your ending place. Or you may go forward in progressive steps, as I believe that I have. I had only one metaphysical background, that's Christian Science, and no other. I have no experience, except having read the published writings, but I've had no experience with any of the other metaphysical movements of the world. Only Christian Science. And I found satisfaction in Christian Science. And I found healing, and I found a good activity for an outlet for my works and experience. And I must say this, that I never had an unhappy minute in my Christian Science life, and I haven't got a complaint about the Christian Science Church or its organization or its board of directors, because all I have seen is the dedication that most of those men and women have put into their lives. Now remember, I've also seen some of the others on the sidelines, but that's their demonstration. The serious ones, the consecrated ones, have done enough so that I and many others have derived tremendous good from Christian Science, and I feel that I would still be in it, except that the message that has evolved in me has carried me what I believe to be a step further, and is carrying our students a step further in demonstration, and if nothing else, is setting them free from any dependence on masses or groups or leaders, and giving each one the opportunity to find their conscious oneness with God. You can do it inside the Christian Science movement, as I did, but evidently most of the world doesn't. Now what I have witnessed is this: there is enough truth in divine science, there is enough truth in unity, there is enough truth in some of the New Thought teachings, so that anybody in the world could pick out those truths and advance their lives 1,000% from wherever they are today. Which teaching will be an ultimate one? Which teaching will ultimately prove to be most satisfactory to most people? That's not your business or mine. We're dealing only today with what will meet our need at this level. And I say to you that any of the teachings, now mark this well because it's on tape and you can hold it against me forever. I say to you that any of the teachings or writings that were founded by men and women of integrity who have devoted their lives consecratedly to truth, either on the mental or spiritual level, there is good in all of them, and enough good to lift us out of wherever we are. Then, should you progress from one teaching to another or one teacher to another, that will be your individual demonstration. But don't make the mistake after you've left one teacher or teaching to try to burn it down. Remember, you left school, but you didn't burn your school down. Leave it for the next generation. And so if you leave one teaching for another, don't knock it, don't destroy it, don't go on a rampage against it. Leave it for those who will need it. And you can always trust Scripture to give you a principle to go by. And in that connection, I offer you this. If this teaching, or that teaching, or that teaching, or that teaching is of God, don't fight against it. It'll destroy you. If it's of man, don't fight it. It'll destroy itself. So don't engage in any rampages. Don't engage in any campaigns. Don't engage in any gossip or rumor about any of the metaphysical or spiritual movements or teachings. Let them be. The good ones have survived for many years and will continue to survive as long as they're based on God. The bad ones come and go, and they do very little harm except of a transitory nature, temporary nature. In a way, they all have ways of exposing themselves sooner or later. All I say to our students, and believe me that I say this to them in every city of the United States and Canada and all over Europe where I travel, have only this to say and believe about all teachers and teachings, that those who are consecrated are of God and they're good, and let the others destroy themselves. That's all. Now, should one of your friends or relatives be following a teaching of which you do not approve, let that be their demonstration. And even if it's one of those that you know to be a pretty wicked one, still let that be their demonstration. Let them wake up in their own way. Let them find their own way out, and I can promise you they will. I have witnessed this work for 27 years, and I've seen people get involved in some pretty wicked teachings. But I notice that as they go on, they have a way of finding themselves and leaving them and going out and finding the next higher step. And so that's the way for us. Please let us agree on this. Every man and woman who has come into the spiritual field through a dedication to God and his fellow man is offering something worthwhile to the world, and in that degree is showing forth fruitage, and in that degree is suitable for somebody. Whether or not it's for you, that's for you to determine by your prayers to God. I'm equally frank in every class in saying that the infinite way is not for everybody. The infinite way is a mystical teaching. It takes intuition to understand it. It takes intuition to be able to grasp and demonstrate it. If you could recite all of the Infinite Way books by heart, you may not be able to heal a headache, because what you intellectually grasp of this teaching will not enhance your progress. It is what you intuitionally receive and respond to. It is what makes a response in that inner ear and inner eye that determines your demonstration. Now, all the people of this world are not mystics, and they're not all ready to be mystics, nor can they understand mystical teachings, and for those there must be others. Pray, pray. Another thing, we in the Infinite Way have no memberships. Therefore, the only tie that unites us is love. Everyone is free to come. Everyone is free to leave. Everyone is free to find their way in some other teaching if they find one that suits them better. There are no ties on anyone here. There are no obligations beyond the obligation of this moment. Each one is left free in Christ. Now, there are aids left behind, as you will see. There are books. There is a monthly letter. And if you are not receiving a copy of the monthly letter and are studying the Infinite Way writing, you should be receiving a copy of it. They're available to you. And they are the aids. They take the place in our work of a correspondence course, because as I travel, for instance, if I have some point come up in this class which hasn't heretofore been stressed, I can just as well write an article on it, send it into my editor, and have it appear in a monthly letter, and then students all over the world will get the benefit of something or other that took place in this class, or the last class, or the next class. And so my monthly letter is a point of contact between me and the students who are studying Infinite Way writings. And that monthly letter contains teachings, things to be put into practice, things to be read in connection with things that are in the writings. In addition to that, we have tape recordings. And in city after city, these tape recording meetings are growing, not in size, because we don't encourage large meetings, but in numbers of tape recorders in a city, and numbers of groups that are listening, and in numbers of days a week that they're listening to it. The reason? Well, now just imagine you have been through a class this week. Do you know that by means of this tape recorder, that students all over the world can go through this same class. In other words, you may be getting soon, well, I know you are receiving the Kailua series of tapes, which is a series of 20 tapes, 40 hours, of a class that I gave to 25 advanced students who came from all over the United States and Canada to Hawaii for this particular period of study in my home. Well, now you can't imagine the value of that, because when you hear those tapes, you're sitting in my living room in Kailua in a group of 25 advanced students listening to a message that came out of me after hours and hours of meditation every day, and you are in that particular class. Now, in my New York class in March, not only I feel, but the students felt then, and my letters since indicate that they still feel that way, that we attained a height of teaching in the last New York class such as never has heretofore been voiced. Well, now just imagine that you can go through that class. Right here in Capetown, you can be a part of that class. And in that class were my 33 teachers, my 60 practitioners, as well as the local students of New York. So you can imagine the atmosphere that was in that class, and imagine what you hear when you hear that tapes. You can't help but benefit. Well, now, so it is. If there's been anything worthwhile in this Capetown class, and I might tell you this, that last year we had 2 days of the Capetown class that are so different than anything else that ever took place in the Infinite Way experience, that they have been going all over the United States and Canada and over to England. 2 days of our last year's Capetown class. The whole class is going, but with special stress on those 2 days. They were so unusual. Now just imagine that within, I should say, 8 to 9 months from today, that there will be people in at least 25 to 50 cities who will go through this Capetown, South Africa class. The way they do it, as a rule, is whoever conducts that work sends out notice, and on Friday night, whoever wishes to come together will hear 2 hours of the class. Saturday morning, 2 hours more. Saturday afternoon, 2 hours more. Saturday night, 2 hours more. And finishing it up on Sunday. So from Friday night to Sunday, you go through a whole week of classwork. Then the tapes still remain if you want to review 1 or 2 of them at some future time. Do you see the advantage of that type of study? Where you go through any class that's ever been given. You don't wait for a teacher to come around once in a year or 2 years for a class. You can go through a class every week of your life. A closed class or a practitioner's class. Because they're on tape, because they're not rehearsed, they're the spontaneous tapes, just like you are witnessing this being taken down. No, nothing edited, nothing taken out, nothing added. Just whatever took place in your consciousness and mind is recorded on tape for whoever else may hear it. So we have writings, and we have tape recordings, and we have a monthly letter. And just remember this, that you are welcome to those, to study them, to practice them, and to have the help of the local practitioners who are able to help you, and there are some right here in Capetown about whom you may learn. And at the same time, you're free. At the same time, remember, nobody is telling you what you must study, when, how much, how little, why, or when you must study it, or what days. You are set free in God to make your own demonstration, to arrange your own meetings, to do as you wish. Now, don't you see that Christian Science has its way of teaching, and the Institute of Religious Science has its way. and the path of truth has its way. And all of those ways have been given to the leaders of those movements under prayer, under consecration, under inspiration. And so for those that follow them, they too have their way of imparting their wisdom, and those that follow them would do well to follow them rigidly and correctly in order to gain the greatest benefit. I hope that answers what my attitude is toward other metaphysical systems and books. Love them, respect them, every single one of them that has come through consecration, and be grateful for every student that enters the path of any one of them, because in that path they may find all they're looking for, or through it they may be led into further steps. Also, the attitude towards other persons having studied different systems. Well, that's it. Respect them, love them, bless them, and above all, don't proselyte. Don't proselyte. Please let everybody find their own way in God. If you find somebody that you think can benefit by the infinite way and you wish to give them a little pamphlet or book, do so. But let your efforts stop at that. After that, let them find their own way. Don't try to take students from one teaching to another teaching, but if students come of their own accord, then give them that which you have. The same way, if students come to me and tell me they're Christian Scientists or they're Unity students or they're New Thought students, but they want to know the infinite way, I will gladly share with them. I won't ask them to leave their church. I won't ask them to leave their movement. I share with them and then leave the choice with them wherever they find it. I expect the same thing takes place with others. If an infinite way student should go over to Mr. Sims or Dr. Brunt or any one of these teachers here or in other cities, I expect that they too will present whatever their truth is in their way, and that is their right, that is their duty, that is their privilege. Don't you see that? And at the same time, everyone that I know of respects the infinite way. They don't all agree that it's the right way to go, but they respect it because of its integrity. They respect it because of its acknowledgement. You perhaps read in a recent monthly letter where I said that one of the fallacies that is going around the world right now is the belief that the time has come for a new teacher or a new teaching. And my answer to that was this: don't you believe it, students? Don't you believe it? The time has come for us to respect the spiritual nature of all teachers and all teachings, and to respect those who are following them. When we learn to do that, God will reveal itself through every teaching. It is only in the degree that we shut off this flow and say, oh no, God is only in the infinite way, or God is only in Christian Science, or truth is only in this teaching, that we shut ourselves off from truth. Once you can acknowledge that God has inspired the leaders and founders of all great religious movements, and therefore there is God to be found in all of them, the greater amount of God you will get out of whichever one you are following. That's my attitude.